On behalf of the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society, I'd like to welcome you to the PBSCCS Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Messina. All right, everybody, I'm here with Mike Lidge of the Philadelphia Phillies organization. Mike, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate your time. Tell the listeners about yourself, if you would, please.
Chris, I appreciate you having me on, man. Really excited to be on here. Big fan of the podcast, so it's cool to be on and chat with you, talk shop for a little bit. A little bit about myself. Starting off, went to undergrad at University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. Spent 4 years there. Actually went into undergrad as a pre-med major to start out. So going into it, I wanted to be, looking long-term in the medical field in some capacity. And, going through school and taking classes, things like that, I kind of geared toward strength and conditioning in terms of, my experience and kind of found my passion, what I wanted to do probably halfway through. So, finished up school there. After that, I was fortunate to get an internship at Athletes Performance, which is now Exos out in Phoenix. That was probably the turning point for me in terms of when I knew I wanted to work in professional sports with professional athletes. Really, really valuable experience. Learned, so much good information, so much good experience from those coaches out there. Working with athletes, not only the performance coaches, but the physical therapists. They have a really good program out there for anyone interested in utilizing that internship. I highly recommend going out there. They have a few locations too. So after Exos, I got where I started my graduate degree, Northeastern Illinois in Northeastern Illinois University in Chicago. It was a 2-year program, so I was full time there. Was fortunate to work out there as well as in the private sector when I could, make some money while I was in school. And I was also helped out as an assistant varsity baseball coach. So a little bit of my background, along with strength and conditioning, was actually from the field side of things, which we know from our end, having a little bit of background in that with what we do, I think has helped me a lot. So. And then going forward, right after school, this probably graduated in March, so probably around February, started to send out some resumes. Had no idea I wanted to get into baseball. Baseball was something that I think long term it was kind of a far-fetched, dream of mine to possibly work in baseball. So I just kind of shot out some resumes because I was like, I'm finishing up school, I should probably get a job at this point. So sent out some resumes and was fortunate enough to hook up with the Giants, and it's kind of been hitting the ground running from there. So going into my 6th year this year in pro ball, it's gone by really quick. So it's been kind of a whirlwind so far, but I wouldn't regret anything in terms of getting baseball and all the connections and things I've made. It's been awesome. So it's kind of been going from there, and and now I'm with the Phillies, 2nd year at the Phillies, and, couldn't be happier, couldn't be more pleased with everything with the Phillies and working here in Reading this year. So it's been great.
So the first time we met, you were in Richmond, and then fast forward a couple years, now you're in Reading, and we're reconnected. So same league, different organizations. Kind of talk about that, how you've handled being in those two different organizations, but being in the same league, being able to see things in the Eastern League, just through a different light, being in Reading now versus Richmond.
Yeah, so Richmond, I enjoyed my time there. Richmond is a fun city to work in and live in. The difference in organization. I mean, obviously knowing the league coming into this year, was a big help. Just knowing the gyms, having an idea of what kind of setup you want to use in the clubhouse, when you're on the road. Those little things, maybe it's a caterer or a restaurant here or there. Those little things really, really help out. The biggest thing I think was just the philosophy of the organization. You have in baseball, there's so many different philosophies in each organization, and I think there's not one tried and true philosophy. I think that in my experience, the cool thing is learning about different ones and how they're applied by different teams. So the different philosophies from San Francisco, from them into Philadelphia here is pretty stark, I think. I won't get into too much in terms of what they were, but I think, having a broad scope of what you're utilizing as a coach, I think is only going to help you moving forward. So, whether it's more of a conservative, preventative, injury preventative program, or whether it's more of a, get after it, make sure we're lifting some weight, make sure we're really stressing the body, things like that. I think there's room for each. So I think the biggest thing, I guess, off the top of my head would be just the setup of the weight room. Richmond had a pretty good setup over there, as you know, and you yourself have a pretty good one in Portland. Reading, on the other hand, we were limited a little bit with the setup there at the stadium, but I think for my end, it allows me to be a little bit more creative with the programming, with getting guys in there. Sometimes you got to use the home gym a little bit, but other than that, that's part of the minor leagues. So you got to take the hand you're dealt and move forward and do your best with it. So I guess that would be the biggest thing, was just in terms of like the actual strength and conditioning was the setup of the weight room and utilizing what's available to you.
Yeah, I keep getting this theme is that you're limited by your creativity, and in the minor leagues you need a lot of creativity at times. And I've seen both of those weight rooms, so I definitely can understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And the other good point there is the having a broad scope. I've talked to a lot of different people from a lot of different organizations, and everybody does it just a little bit differently. But they still have success doing it. So like you said, there's no one tried and true right way and everybody else is wrong. So for you, it sounds like you're taking a good approach to just being open and just working within whatever the organization has. So kudos to you. Do you have any different roles or responsibilities between the different organizations? I think food kind of comes to mind for me. Just talking to other guys in this league specifically, like catering versus just using the clubhouse versus a nutritionist versus strength coach. Are there any different roles and responsibilities? And maybe it's not food, but maybe specifically that one just comes to mind.
For sure. Our nutrition program with the Phillies is phenomenal. We do we invest a lot of money, time, and energy into our program, and that's probably the biggest one, I think. In terms of applying the program, being in contact with our dietitians who do a great job from the big leagues on down. We have a dietitian. She works exclusively with our PA affiliates. So we have Lakewood, we have Reading, we have Lehigh, and we also have Williamsport in short season that just started up. So they do a really good job, and it's really just about communication between them. And basically, my job is being on the ground with the players and seeing what kind of feedback they're giving me in terms of what they want in terms of menu. With the food, it can kind of get tricky because there's so many different palates. You have your Latin American players, you have your American players, so it can be tough to make everyone happy. But I think the biggest thing with the food, last year I had a little bit more responsibility in terms of actually ordering the food and the menu and things like that, especially on the road. Whereas this year, the dietitians have been doing that for us, so it's a big help. And it kind of gives my focus a little bit more to the meat and potatoes of what we do. But the nutrition is huge. I think, different responsibility in terms of, the weight room, just implementing our program, making sure that, guys are getting their lifts in every week. Obviously the conditioning, we have a pretty high volume of conditioning we expect our players to attain, and I think, we hold them to a high standard across the board. On top of that, just making sure that we're in communication with the field staff. We kind of talked about, what kind of schedules are being put out there, workloads, things like that. So just making sure that the guys are understanding when they need to get their work in, making sure they're staying in their routine. Usually at the AA level, guys have a pretty good routine. You don't really have to remind guys as much as maybe the lower levels, but I think at this level and even going up forward, you see a lot of guys that more so seek you out that I've seen. They're a little bit more, further along in their career. So maybe there's, and another thing I've seen is the age range and being in AA for a couple of years. You can have a guy that's maybe 20, and you can have a guy that's maybe in his 30s, has some big league time. So there's a pretty broad range of age that I've seen in AA especially. I remember in 2016 I had a player who was 20 years old, and I had a player that was 40 years old. So it was like 20-year difference between players, which was pretty crazy. So that was cool to see my first year and being able to work in different age of players. So I think those are pretty much the roles, responsibilities. Obviously in season, you want to be able to be as flexible as you can with the schedule. I think that's the biggest thing in terms of the travel, in terms of coordinators being in town, different things like that. So being able to implement the program the best you see fit, I think is the biggest thing, and that really just comes with experience and having a good grasp of your program, I think, is huge.
So one of the things that's not on the notes, but that we kind of discussed a little bit, is that you have a brother playing in this league, if I'm not mistaken. And so I want to kind of talk about that one, because that seems like it'd be really cool for you to be able to see him. He's on the playing side, and you're on the strength and conditioning side. So go into that one a little bit.
Yeah, man. So he got drafted by the Yankees last year, 20th round pick out of Notre Dame. He played 4 years there, senior sign. He got hurt his junior year, got a little bit banged up, so he missed some time his junior year. So went out his senior year, and he's kind of been bouncing around this year. He's filled in for some guys getting hurt. Being his first full season in pro ball, he's been kind of all over. He started out and extended, then they sent him to Trenton twice, so he had 2 stints in Trenton. So it was cool to be able to run into him when we had our series there. I think it was late May. We had middle late May, I think. So really cool thing to see. My parents were able to fly in and kind of surprise us when we were in town. So for them to see us both in the same field playing against each other, I think was very cool. Me personally, I haven't seen him play. Being in pro ball, you're working all summer, as you know, so you don't have much time off. So I hadn't been able to see him play actually since his freshman year in college. So seeing him play against us was pretty cool. It's probably one of the highlights of my career so far was seeing him play down there. And he's actually now, I think he's down in advanced rookie. They sent him to Tampa, and now he's in Staten Island currently playing with the Yankees affiliate there. So hopefully he keeps playing well and can get back to Trenton, and I can see him more this year. But pretty cool experience, man. It was he's kind of been my guinea pig for strength and conditioning ever since I was starting out as a younger coach with some program development and things like that. So back when he was in high school, working with him, and I also he had actually a twin brother. I have another brother too. They're twins. Look nothing alike, but it's been pretty cool. I always tell him I taught him everything he knows in terms of baseball, so I take credit for his baseball and strength and conditioning background. So yeah, it was pretty cool to see.
That is really, really cool, man. I have a younger brother who is in high school now, and he's kind of been my guinea pig in the off seasons of going home and getting him to work out, and so I could definitely see where that rings for you. Just looking back on working with him, and you're probably looking some of that stuff we did wasn't good, but some of that stuff was really good, and now he's here. So that's really cool, man. I'm glad you got to experience that, and that the parents came out and flew out and surprised you guys, and that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's funny too, talking with some of the guys at the Yankees, talking with Meat over there, making sure he's getting in the weight room, and every time I'm over there, I'm making sure that he's in the weight room every time I'm over there, getting in there early, stuff like that. So yeah, definitely very cool experience, and looking forward to follow his career. Maybe one day we'll both get in the big leagues and be able to play each other, and that would be probably the ultimate for us. So that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I feel like the sibling thing, you have to be against each other, not with each other. I probably wouldn't be very happy.
You need that sibling rivalry, little competition. So, yeah, it's very cool following his career and keeping tabs on him.
That's awesome, man. So let me ask you this: what do you believe in within strength and conditioning that others think you are crazy for believing?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, I'm very grounded in the facts and research. I don't like utilizing things on guys that are talking about being a guinea pig. When working with professional athletes, these guys have a lot of money invested in them. So I think we have to do our due diligence and make sure that we're doing the best we can in providing them programs and methods to where they're backed by research, backed by not just research, but good quality research that's been tried and true for a number of years. So, that being said, I don't know if it's my peers thinking I'm crazy, but I've had players look at me crazy when I tell them what kind of running they have. Like I said, the Phillies, our conditioning level, we hold our players to a very high standard, conditioning pitchers and position players. So the volume of running we do is higher than other organizations that I've talked to. But I think, with that being said, I think it's vital, and I believe 100% that the conditioning we do in terms of like the sprint work and the aerobic work, making sure that a lot of teams do more anaerobic work, which is better, aerobic or anaerobic. You can get into all that, but I think you need the aerobic base as a pitcher to be able to withstand the demands of a long season. The thing we have to keep in mind in baseball is, we're in player development. I mean, we're here to get these guys to the big leagues. And when you get to the big leagues, that's a long season, man. You're going from February all the way through hopefully October. That's a long season. So keeping up the workload, keeping up the volume on these guys, particularly relief pitchers, I think, with the running they do, I think is vital. So, and that being said, too, position players, being able to, stress the hamstring, being able to, hamstring injuries are probably the most prevalent injury that we've seen over the years. Research tells us that. So being able to stress the hamstring to the point where, we're not over fatiguing it, but we're also giving it the stimulus it needs to be able to withstand the demands of a season. So I think, like I said, grounded in research, players, they think we're crazy for the amount we run. I guess one other thing that maybe at least in season, and I've talked to a few strength coaches around, in terms of using a one rep max in season, I'm not really a firm believer of personally doing that. I think in season it's more based on feel and having a good, line of communication with the player. Just because there's so many variables and things that go in season, I think, if you're gonna base your workouts off of percent max or a training max, I think the best time to do that would probably be in the off season. But there's everyone has their own way of doing things, so there's not one right way, like I said. But for me, I think personally doing that more in the off season, I think is probably the ideal situation.
Yeah, it's like we already talked about. Everybody does things a little bit differently, and if you have justification for what you do and what you believe in as an organization, and you can get guys to buy in, I mean that goes a long way. So we've talked about it many times, when you're in town or when I'm in town there, and that's kind of the reoccurring theme is if you have justification for what you're doing and the guys buy into it and believe in it, then I mean that's
right.
Pretty successful.
Right. Absolutely.
So along those lines, what do you believe makes a strength and conditioning coach successful? Maybe in general, and then maybe specifically in professional baseball.
For sure, yeah. I think obviously all relative based on an individual. I think a couple of key things that as a strength and conditioning coach you need just in general, no matter what sport or setting you're in, is consistency. I think that's a big thing. Bring consistent energy and preparation you bring every single day. Whether it's a client, whether it's an athlete, a young athlete, older athlete, when they know what you're going to bring every single day, I think that makes your job and their job easier. I think having that consistent approach every day is huge. Especially when you look at it in the baseball side of things, it's a grind. We're playing 140 games and I don't know how many days, maybe 150 some days. So having that consistent approach, I think, is very vital. And we do make a huge impact on these guys too. I think another thing that makes coaches successful, we talk about like creating a good culture and things like that. I think that goes along with preparation. I think that goes along with consistency. I think that goes along with continuing to grow and bringing new research ideas. Being open to different ideas, that whether I'm talking to you and me are talking shop, whether it's, me and Velasquez talking shop, whether it's an article I read, being open, being, not being stuck in the mud in terms of your programming, being creative in your programming. I think that's a big part of it too. Your players, like I said, it's a long season. So if you're mixing a couple new things here or there, I think it goes a long way, and it shows them that you have the ability to think outside the box a little bit. So I think that's a good one. I think being able to seek knowledge from someone, having someone that you can maybe not necessarily call a mentor, but I think someone that you can maybe have a resource with, and maybe call when things are tough or ask for advice or things like that. I think that's a valuable resource for a strength and conditioning coach, especially someone that's just starting out. And just having as many tools in the toolbox, I think that's something that's I heard early on when I just started out, having as many tools as you can get and being able to utilize those tools as you see fit. I think that just comes with, like I said, broadening your horizons, keeping up on research in season, keeping during the baseball season or during your downtime, during your weekends, and not having an ego, I think, is another one too. I think, not really caring who gets. There's a quote, one of my favorite quotes by Harry Truman is, "It's amazing what you can accomplish when nobody cares who gets the credit." So as a strength and conditioning coach, you're behind the scenes, you're in the trenches. You can compare it to maybe like, an offensive lineman in football. Quarterback's going to get all the credit, the running back, but you're in the trenches. You're with these guys most of the time, more than anyone. So, being able to, just not necessarily care, but it's not really your area to be able to take credit for what they're doing. I mean, these guys, I guess I keep referring it to baseball, but these guys are highly, highly skilled athletes, and they've been playing this game their whole life. And, we're just trying to give them that little bit extra to get them over the top, get them to the show. So, I guess taking that into baseball specifically, don't take things personal from these guys. I think that can be a tough one for some guys that I've seen. It's like I said, it's a long season, and it's kind of the clubhouse culture of guys giving each other a hard time, and sometimes you're pretty much telling guys what they don't want to hear a lot of the time, especially with the conditioning. I think understanding your role as a coach becomes secondary to what they're doing on the field too. These guys are here to play. They're here to be on the field. They're here to showcase their skills and develop on the field. So, you have to kind of take a step back in season and understand, you have to, one of Joe Ken, I saw Joe Ken speak this off season, and I highly recommend reading into some of his stuff and looking into some of his stuff. But he's big on being a chameleon. Joe Kent, for those who don't know, is a strength and conditioning coach with the Carolina Panthers. And he's big on being a chameleon, being able to change what you need to do day to day based on maybe it's a schedule, maybe it's a player not feeling right, maybe he's sore. Going into it with an open mind, and you got to kind of change on the fly sometimes. So that can be a lot of times the biggest challenge of working in baseball is having a feel for the workload, the travel, and by feel I mean having a gauge of what these players are going through, and it comes with experience too. But having a gauge of what these guys are going through, and say the guys are due for a workout, maybe they haven't lifted in a few days, particular player, and you really want to get after it this certain day, but he's just crushed. He got a lot of ground balls the day before. He had tough travel. You got to look at their point of view too, and see maybe he's struggling at the dish, so he needs some mental time off too. Those types of things I think go a long way. Being able to extend, another thing I think is huge is being able to understand and explain your programming, how it directly translates to the field, especially when you're talking to coaching staff and coordinators and things like that. Obviously the players, a lot of these times these guys are just going to do whatever you tell them, but if you're able to communicate why that you're doing what you're doing, I think is huge. I think they respect that. I think it shows that not only one, what you're talking about. It's kind of that coaching moment where you're able to kind of showcase what you know. But I think if a hitter's working on keeping his front side closed, or maybe he has his tough time linking, or a pitcher needs to stay on his backside, if you're able to apply that to the weight room, what you're doing in the weight room, I think that's huge. I think that showcases then that you really care about their development and what they're utilizing on the field and carried into the weight room. So having that open dialogue, I think, is huge. And even talking to coaches, sometimes players don't like to get into that. So maybe you talk to the pitching coach, hey, what's so-and-so working on today? Like, how's this guy doing? What's this guy working on in the cage? Things like that. And I think the biggest thing as a coach is, like I said, we're educators. We're here to educate these guys. Defending what you're doing, whether it's your program, being able to educate guys on supplements. If a guy asks you what kind of supplement, well, what should I take? And then you have to go on your phone and look it up. Like, you should already know what you have. Like, with the Phillies, we have a pretty good variety of supplements. And, it's my job to be able to educate these guys on what they're taking. And maybe you refer to a dietitian at times if you need to, or whatever resource online, whatever it is. But, being able to not only defend, but just being able to educate guys on everything in your area, I think is very, very huge. And they respect when you're able to give them a quick answer with that.
There's so much good stuff there. First of all, if people don't know who Joe Ken is, that's an issue. I would recommend getting on that immediately. But no, dude, there's a ton of good stuff there just for baseball, for any strength coach in general. And I think at times they kind of overlap, right? Like, I know there's differences in baseball than other sports, but those reoccurring themes, being able to educate and communicate your program and be consistent, those apply anywhere you're at. So really,
Right.
really good answer there. I kind of want to just piggyback on it a little bit. What advice do you have for others in the field, either that have been in for a while or who are looking to get into baseball at a younger age, maybe grad school or something like that?
For sure, yeah. I think, for me, as a young strength coach, I sought out advice of some older guys. I think it's never a wrong time to ask questions, no matter what your experience level is. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I think in terms of controlling your attitude and preparation, I think that's huge. Controlling the effort that you give every day, going into each and every day with the same preparation and attitude that your players are giving you is all that, they would ask of you to do. For me, I keep a notepad out and I write down all my, tasks for the day, I have sticky notes all over my desk so I don't forget anything. If I was to keep everything in my head, I would forget something. So, having a system where you're able to organize your thoughts and organize your plan of attack for the next day, I think is huge. I think that being said, in baseball specifically, and during a long season, you have to find that time to get away and just kind of have your me time. I think, whether you're a guy that likes to get in the weight room on your day off or hit the beach or whatever, find your time away when you can. I think getting away from it just clears your mind and just gives you that opportunity to just kind of take a step back and reevaluate some things of what you need to do. We got our All-Star break coming up, so I'm going to hopefully use that time to relax and get away from things a little bit, get away from baseball. I think another thing too is not being satisfied. Pushing yourself with the knowledge, pushing yourself with continuing to find research. Not only in baseball. I think if you're as a baseball strength coach, if you're it's not going to hurt you to look outside the box and look at maybe what I know NSCA has a hockey certification course I've actually looked into and attending. I think that would be something just kind of thinking, like I said, outside the box and maybe not pigeonholing yourself into baseball. Look into other sports. Look into in the off season, maybe hitting up a strength coach in a local college or professional, LinkedIn or whatever, and hanging out with them for a day and just kind of seeing what kind of things they're doing, whether it's another sport or your sport or whatever. I think, just kind of broadening your scope of, like I said, not only just baseball, other sports. That's one thing I try to do in the off season. I try to, visit, whether I'm in, born and raised in Chicago, so back home, trying to, maybe find a couple coaches that I can, link up with, whether it's on LinkedIn or whatever, and just kind of hang out with them, talk shop, and, if I pick their brain a little bit on what they do in their sport, and maybe I can apply that to baseball and what I do with our guys too. So, just not pigeonholing yourself into baseball, I think is another thing, that I would tell myself early on.
It's like the sports specialization talk, like for young athletes. I kind of feel like it's the same thing for strength coaches. Like when I was first getting in and I was in grad school, I was working with every team, and then I was able to kind of narrow my focus into baseball. I think that probably rings for what you're saying here. Like I'm reading a hockey training book right now just because it's something different to get my mind off of baseball sometimes. You know what I mean? So. Kind of speaking of books and education, where are you going for your continuing ed? Are you reading books, listening to podcasts, attending seminars? Where are you going for continuing ed? And then maybe give me a couple examples of what you might be reading or have recently read in the past.
For sure, yeah. I think the awesome thing about working with the Phillies is we attend the national conference as a staff every 2 years. So I think it's awesome to bring everyone out there, and the National Coaches Conference, for those who don't know, it is usually held early January every year. Highly recommend, if you haven't attended, get out there, network. There's some great, really, really great and smart strength coaches, in all areas, college, professional, men's, women's, whatever. Great experience for me. I highly recommend getting out there. So I attended that this year. I'll do my best to keep up on the articles, through the NSCA journals, through, just kind of going through those and maybe finding something I want to look into, whether it's, hamstring prevention or, during season, you kind of bounce around from different guys, maybe we got a guy that's nicked up. He's got some shoulder impingement. So I'll maybe look up a couple articles on, shoulder impingement or training the shoulder, things like that. That being said, every off season, when the off season kind of ends, I kind of like to wind down and get back to the basics. I think getting back to the basics in the off season is just kind of a way to freshen up on, for me personally, the anatomy of the body. I think that and physiology, just, we took all those classes in college, but it's also good to keep up and refresh ourselves on that, just like we would do if we're trying to clean up our power clean or overhead snatch. Um, Keeping up on that stuff, I think is important too in the off season. So I try to get back with that, just brush up on my basics, just because it's so important to be able to have that foundation. And I think going along with that too, finding stuff online. NSCA offers quizzes. They offer a lot of different things. The regional conferences. I want to try to attend one of those this year. I attended one in Arizona a couple years ago that I really enjoyed. Got to hook up with a couple of people I haven't seen in a few years in the field too. So, whatever's in your area, just kind of look in your area and see, because most of the time they're in pretty big, pretty broad range across the country in the off season.
Yeah, they're kind of all over the place. It's just a matter of seeking it out and finding it, and you never know what's in your area or who's speaking.
Right.
So, yeah, off season's kind of that time to go out and venture and find some things to do and people to talk to. So,
right. Sorry to cut you off, but staying on top of the NSCA stuff, they also have a podcast. Scott Caulfield has a really good podcast as well that I'll throw on the bus rides too. It's really good. He does a really good job with it. And then for those that, I guess another book that I kind of resource I've read. I picked it up a couple years ago, but it's called Extreme Ownership. It's by Jocko Willink. This guy's a former Navy SEAL sniper, I believe, and it's filled with these different accounts of his of these different missions. And the cool thing is how he applies it to the real world, the business world, and from our standpoint, and seeing the carryover is very cool between how he attacks the missions, how he creates accountability within his team, and then how he creates that accountability and carries that over into the business world is very cool. There's a lot of cool accounts from him in there that, I'll just kind of pick it up and read a few pages now and then just to kind of, see. I mean, there's a bunch of them. I don't know how many there are. There's a couple of my favorites in there, but he also has a podcast too, and he's a good follow on Instagram as well. The guy gets after it. So, good follow, Jocko Willink.
That book has been recommended so many times on this podcast. If the people listening to this haven't read it yet, this is the episode. Just go get it, read it. It's unbelievable. I read it this off season. My coordinator was reading it last year, and he was like, "Yeah, when I'm done, I'll let you borrow it." And I was like, "I'm not waiting. It's too many people are telling me to read it." So I bought it as soon as it came in. I opened it out of the box and just read through the book. It's very good, and I recommend it to anybody that's listening.
The book fires you up because it takes the extreme of him being in the heat of battle, and then he does such a good job of just relating that to what we do on a day-to-day basis, whether you're in strength and conditioning, whether you're a CEO, whether you're, an accountant, whatever it is. I think it's such a good read. It's something that I've recommended to a lot of people and highly recommend pick it up. It's a great read.
Right on, man. I'm right there with you. So if you have time, I'd like to do a lightning round. I don't know what you got going on this morning, but if you got some time, I think we can get into it. What do you think?
Let's do it. I got time, man. Let's do it.
Perfect. All right. First question: biggest influence in the field of strength and conditioning. Who is it?
Oh man, biggest influence. Man, that's a good question. I would have to go back to when I first started undergrad. I was in pre-med. So I'd have to go with my grandfather on that one, just because he was a medical doctor, and he kind of got me into sports medicine at a young age, being around athletes and things like that. But he was also an animal in the weight room. Like, I remember going and working out with him. He was a big tennis player, but I remember going out with him when he was probably in his 70s and just crushing the workouts. I was like, man, when I want to be jacked like him when I'm 70. So I guess he kind of got me started from the ground up at a young age of just working out, and And then going to my dad to started to, get me weightlifting when I was about getting into high school, I think. My dad played professional hockey, so he had a little bit of a background in training and things like that. So it was probably around that time I started working out, weightlifting, and really just kind of loved it from there. I mean, we had a little setup in our basement, a little squat rack, and we had this old bench and all these plates that he had from like the 70s out down there. So I'd go down there, and in my free time, that's what I love to do. It's kind of my escape. So I credit him for getting me started in the passion I had for, performance training and then sports medicine, as well as my grandfather. And then, on the professional side, there's so many influences you have, whether it's for me with the Giants. Carl coaching over there has been an invaluable resource for me. Major League Strength and Conditioning coach for the San Francisco Giants. Carl, shout out to him. Awesome dude, great resource. Reach out to him. He's an awesome dude. So learned a lot from him, and moving forward, hopefully continue to connect with more and more people in the field.
Right on, man. The old school weight set in the basement can't be beat.
Yeah, that is what it's about right there. I mean, the Rocky setup you got down there, you got the old the weights with the little pins that you got to spin on the weights, and you got the you know what I mean. So you can't beat that stuff. That's as good as it gets.
That is what I plan on raising my future kids on. Is just weights in the basement or in the garage, and just throwing it around old school.
Absolutely.
So one piece of equipment to train with, what would it be?
One piece of equipment. I'm sure you get barbell a lot. So I'll change it up. I'll go kettlebell.
Kettlebell.
For me, I think, being on the road, I think, you got to pack your trunk, and you got to have as much room and space available. And kettlebell, for me, it's easy to travel with. You can do so much with it in terms of, core stability, shoulder mobility. You can, power output, things like that. I think you can, the range of exercises and things from a mobility and stability standpoint, there's so much you can do. You talk about, barbell, obviously you're able to load up the barbell a little bit more. But I think kettlebell, you can get a little bit more creative with some of the things you're doing with it, depending on how much you're using. But I think, that's one of the courses I want to do is do the kettlebell certification course. I've heard really good things about it. And there's so many different types of exercises you can do with it. I'm just kind of scratching the surface with how I use it. So I want to be able to get better at it. But I love the kettlebell. I think it's a great tool to use. And I think, from, like I said, a power output, stability, mobility standpoint, I think it's a great tool for baseball players to use.
Yeah, especially in our setting with the trunk, you can't really travel with a barbell. So the kettlebell comes in handy quite a bit.
Yeah, the kettlebell is a mainstay in the trunk for sure. Use it as much as I can. It's a great tool.
Third one, biggest accomplishment professionally and or personally.
Biggest accomplishment professionally, man, I probably have to go 2014 with the Giants. I was fortunate enough to be on the staff that was able to get a ring that year, man. That was probably the coolest thing that I've been able to account so far in my career. Having a little bit of a hand in that, it was just kind of almost surreal looking at it, being my second year in baseball. My first year in AZL, I worked in AZL my first year in 2013, and we actually won the AZL championship that year. And then my next year, we won the World Series. So it was pretty cool to get a couple rings in my first 2 years. Kind of looking past that. I want to get more, but it makes you hungrier. But man, that was a pretty cool experience to be able to be a part of that, and and see some of those players, their work habits, just in a a short amount of time. Being my second year there, I think that's something that I've kind of carried over and try to apply to guys still to this day. A lot of those guys are still on the team over there with the Giants, so just keeping tabs on them and following them is cool. But I think 2014 was a pretty cool experience for me, and being able to follow us through that it was pretty awesome.
I'm so envious of you. Just put that as a note. Any career other than strength and conditioning, what would you choose? Last one.
Man, I honestly, I'd probably be a professor. I know strength and conditioning, a lot of it is educating and being a teacher with these guys, but I really, really enjoy teaching and spreading knowledge and having an impact on people in that way. That's I guess if you want to go like more outside the box, because they're kind of a little bit similar. I probably want to be something like a firefighter or something in public service like that, either a cop or a firefighter. I think I have so much respect for those guys and what they do on a day-to-day basis. Those guys are awesome. I think it's awesome how we have the tactical strength and conditioning certification now. That's something I want to look into as well. I think how those guys train and how those guys go about it day to day is phenomenal. So I've got my best friend is a firefighter himself, so he's told me counted some stories about that. But those guys get after it too, man. They're up at 3-4 in the morning. They can't sleep and they're getting after it in the weight room. So it fires me up to be able to, we have to get up at 9 and 10 in the morning and work out ourselves. So those guys are doing it around the clock. So I'd probably say that, there's two for you, teacher or a firefighter.
An educator or a serviceman, similar to what you do in strength and conditioning anyways, right? You educate and you serve. So
that's exactly right. That's just my DNA, I guess.
Yeah, we're all kind of wired like that, man. It's been fun, though. I've had a great time. There's a lot of good stuff in this one. The listeners are really going to like it. If we want to get in touch with you, where can we go? Are you on social media?
Yeah, man. I guess the best way to contact me would be through LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, Mike Lidge. Email address mlidge@phillies.com. Shoot me an email. I'm on Instagram a little bit. I don't really go on there as much as some people might. But m_lidge89 is my handle on there. Happy to hit me up on LinkedIn, talk shop, whatever. Email me. Be happy to reach out and talk to anyone. Strength and conditioning. Whatever setting it may be, I'd be happy to reach out and talk shop, man. Always up for it.
Right on, man. Well, I appreciate you taking some time out of your morning and working with my spotty Wi-Fi yesterday, and we'll be talking soon.
All right, Chris. Appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot.
Yep.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, everybody. That concludes our episode with Mike. I hope you enjoyed this one. He shared a lot of good information and a lot of good advice on how to be successful in the field. 3 things that I took from Mike: be flexible with your schedule, educate your players, and make time to refresh the basics. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll talk to you again on the next one.